Elizabeth Vargas. Tonight, major changes at the White House as one of the president's loyal advisors resigns. What does it mean for the administration? Paris protests, violence in the streets as more than 1 million young people riot for the right to a job for life. Culture war. Religious voters declare war on Hollywood, the internet, and even some politicians they helped elect. We'll take a closer look. And sleepless in America. Teenagers falling asleep in class and at the wheel. Simple ways to save them from sleep deprivation.
From ABC News, this is World News Tonight with Bob Woodruff and Elizabeth Vargas.
Good evening. We begin with a new face at the highest level of the Bush administration. Today, Andy Card, the second longest-serving chief of staff in history, resigned. There have been calls from within the Republican Party for a shakeup at the White House as the Bush administration's public approval ratings reached all-time lows. Well, tonight, Josh Bolten is the new chief of staff, and the question is, what difference will this make for the White House and how it does business? ABC's chief White House correspondent Martha Raddatz joins us. Martha, this was a bit of a surprise this morning.
It surprised many people, Elizabeth, but there has been no one closer to President Bush than Andy Card, which is probably why he figured out it was time to leave.
Look forward.
The president's announcement that his longtime chief of staff was stepping down was difficult and heartfelt.
I have relied on Andy's wise counsel, his calm in crisis, his absolute integrity, and his tireless commitment to public service.
It was Card who whispered in the president's ear on 9/11 that America was under attack. Card who organized the president's only trip to Iraq. Card who shared family weekends at Camp David.
I'm grateful for the friendship that you've shown me. I'm grateful for the love that Laura has shared with Kathy and with me.
Card's replacement, Josh Bolten, has been a loyal member of Bush's inner circle from the beginning. He is currently director of the Office of Management and Budget, and before that was deputy chief of staff.
I'm deeply honored now by the opportunity to succeed Andy Card as White House Chief of Staff. I say succeed Andy Card and not replace him because Andy cannot be replaced.
But after the Harriet Miers debacle, the Katrina disaster, and the furor over the Dubai ports deal, many in the president's own party were looking for change. It was March 12th when the drumbeat for a staff shakeup began. On March 15th, the White House was besieged with questions, which were brushed aside.
Are any staff changes at the White House imminent?
Jim, let me speak very clearly to this. This is part of the inside Washington babble that goes on in this town.
But while McClellan was accusing the press of playing parlor games, the president had been discussing a change with Card for over a week. The importance of the chief of staff to the president cannot be exaggerated, nor can the demands. Andy Card is awake each morning by 4:20 a.m. By 5:30, he is at the office reading intelligence reports, newspapers, and reviewing the president's schedule. By 6:45, Card is in the Oval Office to greet the president. He doesn't leave the White House until 8:30, arriving home around 9, where he continues to make calls on the president's behalf and prepare for the next day, not usually retiring before 11. Card and the president made the final decision about his resignation last weekend, Elizabeth. The White House says Card recognized it was time for a change.
All right, Martha Raddatz, thanks so much. ABC's chief Washington correspondent George Stephanopoulos joins us now. And George, bottom line, is this a shakeup or not?
More like a natural succession, I would say, Elizabeth. As Martha pointed out, Bolten has been a longtime member of the inner circle. This is nothing of the scale like Ronald Reagan had after Iran-Contra in his second term, when he brought in 4 senior members of his team, including a former senior senator like Howard Baker. But this has been in the works for a long time. Josh Bolten has actually been sounding out people to come work with him since last fall in this new job. And the big question is, how much of a free hand does he have to bring in more new people? The White House says it's completely free. People on Capitol Hill are somewhat skeptical.
And as we've been reporting, the president's approval ratings are at an all-time low or near an all-time low. In addition, he's been fighting with members of his own party. Will this change today change the way the White House does business or its policies or anything substantive at all?
I think by bringing in Josh Bolten, the president is saying he doesn't want a new direction in policy, but I think he's hoping that the White House will now execute better. Josh Bolten is very analytical. He is well respected and well liked on Capitol Hill and among the White House staff. You know, for a button-down guy, he's a lot of fun. He's a big bowler. He rides Harleys. He plays bass guitar in a rock band, and that should help smooth some relations with members of Capitol Hill. But the problem for the president is the policy. Iraq, immigration, spending. These are big issues that have deep divides in his party. No one person can bridge those divides.
Those are big divides indeed. All right, George Stephanopoulos, thanks so much. We turn now to France, where more than 1 million people demonstrated in sweeping and sometimes violent protests today. They're marching against a new law that would allow companies to fire young workers without cause. The French have long enjoyed privileges all sorts of other people around the world do not have. ABC's David Wright has more from Paris on today's battle lines.
As the sun sets, the violence flares. Young demonstrators taunted French police. The police, in full riot gear, used paintball guns to identify the troublemakers. Then plainclothes officers moved in and hauled them out.
The protesters are throwing everything from bottles to bicycles at the police, who are now using force to restore order. The Paris police have a lot of experience at this, but even for them, it's a struggle.
These students and union workers are protesting a new law set to take effect next month that allows companies to lay off workers under 26 without giving cause during their first 2 years on the job.
One day we work, the day after they can say they finish to work somewhere else.
We can't allow the bosses to lay off without any purpose.
But it is this way the world over.
Well, it's not that in France.
French workers are used to the good life. They have a 35-hour work week. They get 5 weeks vacation a year, and it's extremely hard to fire them. 1 in 4 young people here are unemployed, in part because French companies don't want to promise them a job for life. France's government says the only way to create job opportunities is to sacrifice some job security. Business owners like the new law.
It offers for the company more flexibility. Training costs a lot of money, and if we want to work with those people, we keep them.
But a majority of the population here likes it the old way. The French government is not backing down, and the protesters show no signs of giving up the fight. David Wright, ABC News, Paris.
Now to Israel, where there was a crucial parliamentary election today and the lowest voter turnout in that nation's history. The Kadima party, led by interim Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, won at least 29 of 120 seats. Now it must form a government. In his victory speech tonight, Olmert said Israel is ready to give up some of the land it occupies to set a final border with the Palestinians. In Afghanistan, the man who faced a possible death sentence for his conversion from Islam to Christianity has vanished in Kabul just hours after his release from prison. Abdul Rahman apparently has gone into hiding in fear for his life. An Afghan court dropped all charges against him after pressure from the U.S. and other Western nations. Italy has said it may give Mr. Rahman asylum. Back here in this country, at the Supreme Court, the justices heard arguments in a landmark case that could help determine the extent of the president's powers in the war on terror. It involves a challenge brought by Osama bin Laden's driver, Salim Hamdan. He claims the military tribunals set up by President Bush to try terror suspects are unconstitutional. We're joined now by ABC's Claire Shipman, who was covering the story today. And Claire, the president has maintained that people like Mr. Hamdan are prisoners of war. They're not entitled to legal protections most Americans get in court.
Well, indeed, that's right, Elizabeth. And Hamdan's lawyers are arguing, though, that these commissions don't offer basic rights. For example, the same sorts of protections that the military justice system would offer, especially civilian courts. For example, the right to be present at your own hearing. The government does argue the president has the statutory right to create these commissions, as other presidents before him have done, like FDR. And one point that annoyed a number of the justices, Elizabeth, it was interesting, the government also argues the Supreme Court shouldn't even be ruling on this case, that authority was in effect trumped when Congress passed a law in December that essentially narrows the ability for many of these prisoners to mount legal challenges.
In the meantime, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, didn't participate today because he ruled on this case in a lower court, But Justice Scalia did take part despite a lot of calls to recuse himself.
He did. What has happened is that Justice Scalia earlier this month was at a conference in Switzerland, and he made some comments that caused many to question his impartiality.
I had a son on that battlefield, and they were shooting at my son. And I am not about to give this man, who was captured in a war, a full jury trial. I mean, it's crazy.
Now, Elizabeth, all eyes, however, are on Justice Kennedy. He is the new swing vote, and although no court watcher wants to predict the outcome of this, Elizabeth, a lot of people noticed that Justice Kennedy had a lot of tough questions today for the government's lawyer.
All right, Claire Shipman, thanks so much. Two men who made quite a mark in Washington have died. Caspar Weinberger directed the biggest peacetime military buildup in American history as President Reagan's first defense secretary. He had previously served in the cabinets of Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, earning the nickname Cap the Knife for his cost-cutting zeal. After leaving public service, Weinberger was indicted in the arms for hostages scandal known as Iran-Contra, but the first President Bush pardoned him before the case went to trial. Caspar Weinberger was 88 years old. And Lynn Nofziger, the rumpled spokesman and strategist for Ronald Reagan in Sacramento and in Washington, has died. In 1981, it was Nofziger who announced to the world that President Reagan had been shot by John Hinckley. Lynn Nofziger was 81. And when we return, they say there's a war on Christians, how religious voters are mobilizing to fight back. We'll take a closer look. In desperate need of sleep, why so many teenagers say they're so tired and what schools are doing about it. And rejected by Hallmark, the greeting cards you won't be seeing at the stationery store.
This is World News Tonight, brought to you by Liquid Plumr Power Jet.
We're going to take a closer look at conservatives mobilizing to fight what they call the war on Christians in this country. Religious conservatives have been meeting in Washington to explore, quote, the far-reaching assault on Judeo-Christian values. 30% of Americans are Christian conservatives, and with Republicans controlling Congress and the White House, it's widely believed they have more influence than at any time in recent memory. So why are so many so angry? ABC's Jake Tapper takes a closer look.
At the Bethlehem, Georgia First Baptist Church on Christmas Avenue, Pastor Jody Heiss told his congregation Sunday that battle lines are being drawn.
We find ourselves, without question, in the midst of a cultural war. It's a war on Christians.
His congregants were ready to sign up.
The Bible-believing Christian conservatives are banding together.
Heiss traveled to a conference sponsored by the conservative evangelical group Vision America titled The War on Christians. It featured prominent conservative Christian leaders discussing how they're losing the culture wars on issues such as abortion, gay marriage, liberal judges, and Hollywood. They also called the popular website MySpace.com poison for its millions of young users.
It's a pornography hole. Okay, that's what it is. MySpace.com.
Political observers say so-called values voters were key to President Bush's re-election victory. But here at this conference, many of those same voters, their pastors, and their leaders say they feel duped by the Republican Party and the Bush administration.
The last election, values voters in many ways were used.
They say Republicans brought out their big issues, pandered to them, and then forgot all about them, such as with the proposed constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage.
If our president would speak more directly to that issue, even when he's not running for election, we'd get a lot more traction in the Senate and the House.
Embattled Congressman Tom DeLay was received very warmly. But even he seemed to distance himself from the Republican establishment. He praised the religious beliefs of previous presidents, but did not mention President Bush.
In America, the greatest leaders aren't the ones in houses of Congress, but in houses of God.
The biggest threat for the Republican Party is not that these distressed values voters will vote for Democrats, but that come this November, they will not vote at all. Jake Tapper, ABC News, Washington.
Our closer look for today. Still ahead, it may be more than boredom making kids fall asleep in school. Tools to help the sleep deprived.
tomorrow, a woman's choice. The major surgery more and more pregnant women are asking for. But are the benefits worth it? Are they putting themselves and their unborn child at unnecessary risk? Find out tomorrow, only on World News Tonight.
The Federal Reserve has raised interest rates another quarter point to 4.75%, the highest in 5 years. It was the Fed's 15th consecutive increase and the first since Ben Bernanke replaced Alan Greenspan as chairman. The Fed left the door open to more increases to keep inflation at bay as the economy improves. That disappointed Wall Street. The Dow Jones fell more than 95 points for the day. There's a troubling new poll out today that suggests that many of the nation's teenagers are not getting enough sleep. In many cases, they're so sleep-deprived they're driving drowsy and falling asleep in class. The poll has troubles of its own. It was conducted by an organization that in the past received funding from companies that make sleeping pills. But there is no disputing the problem is very real. Here's ABC's John McKenzie.
To find out how sleep-deprived teenagers are today, just ask them.
And sometimes I'm so tired that I actually have to go to the nurse and sleep.
Just the other day, I kind of fell asleep behind the wheel.
During the teenage years, sleep patterns change dramatically. Beginning at puberty, melatonin, the hormone that helps trigger sleep, is produced hours later each day.
Well, we know after puberty, so children are going to bed, say a 12-year-old is falling asleep at 9 o'clock at night. After puberty, it's going to shift later till about 11 o'clock at night.
And with many teens having to get up before dawn, they're lucky to get 7 hours of sleep a night.
Many teenagers are not getting enough sleep, and that can be as much as 2 hours, too little sleep every single day. It has downstream consequences for school performance, for mood, and for behavior.
But it does not have to be that way. Dozens of school districts are allowing teens to get more sleep by starting classes at least an hour later each morning. In Minneapolis, that was enough to actually reduce disciplinary problems and lower the dropout rate. And there's much teens and their parents can do. Turn off all electronic equipment, the iPod, TV, stereo, computer, at least 30 minutes before bed to help teenagers wind down.
The point is to make sleep the priority and to make an environment that's positive towards sleeping.
Cut out all caffeinated beverages, including colas and energy drinks, by noon each day.
Cut the caffeine at least, if we could cut it all the day, it'd be great, but if you can cut it after noon, that'd be terrific.
And catch up sleep on the weekend. But that does not mean allowing teens to sleep until noon.
And I usually recommend they wake up by 9 or 9:30, so they're getting a few extra hours of sleep, but they're not shifting totally.
Getting teens to get more sleep is a gradual process, but the need, say researchers, could not be more obvious. John McKenzie, ABC News, New York.
Straight ahead, you can't always say it with Hallmark. Some of their best and worst ideas are too funny to sell. Finally from us, when you care enough to send the very best, chances are the people who published that greeting card had to sift through some of the very worst. We took a look behind the scenes of the nation's largest card company to find out how the ideas come together. It is among the toughest gigs in writing, coming up with funny one-liners for Hallmark's shoebox line of irreverent greeting cards.
Dad, thanks for putting up with all of my shenanigans. And thanks for referring to them as shenanigans rather than the technical word, crimes.
Writers at Hallmark's headquarters know that painfully well, since only 10% of their one-liners make the first cut, and only a fraction of that will ever make the inside of an actual card. The rest of those lines, and there are thousands, end up banished with the label FBN. Funny, but no.
If it's over the top, it's just going to come back to us with a big no.
Among those writing the fine line between humorous and just silly, this one about a woman seeking a yoga class but finding a room full of Yodas. And then there are those that blur the distinction between funny and offensive. There was a holiday card showing a couple snuggling on a couch with a bearded man wearing a robe and a turban. Then the woman says, "Honey, this Afghan your mom gave us is really warm." As the tasteful folks at Hallmark say, FBN. Funny, but no. No, indeed. That's World News Tonight for this Tuesday. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. I hope we'll see you again tomorrow night. For Bob Woodruff and all of us at ABC News, good night.